A billionaire visits his ex-wife's home for what should have been a simple drop-off, but when he hears soft sobbing coming from the basement, everything changes. He goes downstairs and finds his 5-year-old daughter alone, crying in the dark, clutching a broken doll. His ex-wife swears it's just a phase, but the look in that little girl's eyes says something much darker. Why was she locked away? What's really going on behind those walls? And what dark secret has this mother been hiding all along? Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below letting us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you love this story, don't forget to subscribe. Rain drummed against the windshield of Adrien Vale's Tesla as he sat in the parking garage of his downtown penthouse, a small velvet box turning slowly in his hands. Inside rested his mother's gold locket, its delicate chain coiled like a sleeping snake. The vintage piece was one of the few things she'd left behind, and now it would belong to Lily. Lily, his daughter's name caught in his throat. 5 years old in 3 days, and he hadn't seen her face in over a year. The weight of missed bedtime stories and untouched breakfast plates pressed down on his chest like a stone. Adrien checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. At 42, his dark hair was starting to gray at the temples, and fine lines had begun to etch themselves around his eyes. The Wall Street Journal called him Silicon Valley's Shadow King, but right now, he felt more like a fool. The drive to Rachel's suburban house took 40 minutes. Each mile marker brought a fresh wave of memories. Lily's first steps, her delighted squeals when he'd push her on the swing, the way she'd curl up in his lap during thunderstorms. He'd given up custody without a fight, convinced his 60-hour workweeks made him unfit for fatherhood. Now that decision haunted him like a stubborn ghost. Rachel's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, all perfect lawn and trimmed hedges. The rain had softened to a misty drizzle, but dark clouds still hung low and heavy. Adrien parked in the driveway, his heart hammering against his ribs as he grabbed the velvet box and his umbrella. The front door's brass knocker felt cold under his knuckles. He waited, counting his breaths the way his therapist had taught him. 1, 2, 3. The door opened, and there stood Rachel. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her makeup flawless as always. But something about her eyes seemed different. Harder, maybe, or more distant than he remembered. "Adrien," she said, his name clipped and precise. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Rachel." He kept his voice steady, professional. "I know this is unexpected. I wanted to drop something off for Lily's birthday." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. "You could have mailed it or gone through the lawyers." "I know." He held up the velvet box. "It was my mother's. I wanted to give it to her myself." Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. The house behind her was dim, despite the early afternoon hour. Heavy curtains blocked most of the natural light, and an unsettling quiet hung in the air, the kind of silence that felt more like a presence than an absence. "She's having one of her days," Rachel said, not moving from the doorway. "It's not a good time." A sound drifted up from somewhere below, faint but unmistakable. A child's cry quickly muffled. Adrien's spine stiffened. "Was that Lily?" "She's throwing a tantrum." Rachel waved her hand dismissively. "You know how kids can be. I'm handling it." The cry came again, softer this time, but carrying a note that made Adrien's fatherly instincts surge. "I need to use your bathroom," he said suddenly. "Please." It was a long drive. Rachel hesitated, then stepped aside with obvious reluctance. "You know where it is. Make it quick." Instead of heading upstairs to the bathroom, Adrien moved silently through the house, following the sound. The kitchen was spotless, almost sterile, without any of the cheerful artwork that should have covered the refrigerator. No toys scattered on the floor, no signs a child lived here at all. The basement door was closed but unlocked. Adrien's hand trembled slightly as he turned the knob, every fiber of his being screaming that something was wrong. The stairs creaked under his careful steps. The basement was unfinished, with bare concrete walls and a single bulb casting weak yellow light. And there, in the corner, sat Lily. His heart shattered. She looked so small, huddled on the cold floor in a pale blue dress. Her dark hair hung limply around her face, and her arms were wrapped tightly around a raggedy doll, with button eyes. She didn't jump up or call out to him. She just stared, her eyes huge and solemn in her thin face. Lily. Adrien's voice cracked as he knelt down, keeping his movements slow and gentle. Sweetheart. She didn't answer. Didn't call him daddy like she used to. She just clutched her doll tighter, as if it were a shield between them. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. What do you think you're doing? Rachel's voice cracked like a whip. Why is our daughter in the basement? Adrien fought to keep, his voice level though rage and horror churned in his gut. She likes it down here. Rachel's tone was dismissive, but her eyes held a wild edge. She needs the quiet. It helps her behave. Behave? The word tasted like poison. She's been difficult lately, defiant. Sometimes she needs time to think about her actions. Rachel crossed her arms. Don't you dare judge my parenting, Adrien. You gave up that right when you walked away. Adrien looked back at Lily, who hadn't moved or made a sound during the entire exchange. The silence felt wrong coming from a 5-year-old. Everything about this felt wrong. He stood slowly, his mind racing through options, calculations, consequences. The businessman in him wanted to fix this immediately, but the father in him knew. One wrong move could make things worse for Lily. I should go, he said finally, each word burning his throat like acid. He placed the velvet box on a nearby shelf, unable to complete even this simple gift-giving gesture in the suffocating atmosphere. Rachel followed him up the stairs, her heels clicking against each step like tiny hammers. He didn't speak as he walked to the front door, didn't trust himself to keep his composure if he opened his mouth, but the image stayed with him as he drove away. His daughter on that cold floor, her eyes full of shadows no child should know, her silence louder than any scream. The rain had started again, harder now, but Adrien barely noticed. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, his daughter's quiet gaze haunting every blink of his eyes. Morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrien's corner office, but he barely noticed its warmth. His eyes remained fixed on the velvet box sitting unopened on his glass desk. He hadn't been able to give it to Lily yesterday. The thought of her sitting alone in that dark basement made his stomach churn. The crying echoed in his memory. Soft, muffled, like she'd learned to stay quiet even in her distress. And those eyes. Adrien ran a hand over his face, trying to erase the image of Lily's vacant stare. She used to have such expressive eyes, always sparkling with curiosity and mischief. What had happened to his little girl in the year he'd been gone? His computer screen showed dozens of unread emails, and his phone buzzed with messages from investors and board members. But for the first time in his career, the numbers and projections held no interest. He couldn't focus on market trends, when all he could think about was that cold concrete floor and the way Lily had clutched her doll like a lifeline. Mr. Vale, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. The quarterly projections meeting starts in 5 minutes. Adrien pressed the button to respond. Cancel it. He paused, then added, in fact, clear my schedule for tomorrow too. Sir? The surprise in her voice was evident. Adrien Vale never canceled meetings. Something's come up. Family matter. The words felt strange on his tongue. When was the last time he'd prioritized family over business? He spent the next hour forming a plan. He needed to see Lily, again, to understand what was happening in that house. But Rachel would never allow another unexpected visit. She was too controlled, too careful for that. Adrien picked up his designer sunglasses from his desk and placed them in his briefcase. Then he took them out again, studying them thoughtfully. A simple excuse, but it might work. Rachel's perfectionism wouldn't let her keep something that wasn't hers, even something as trivial as forgotten sunglasses. The next morning, Adrien parked his car in Rachel's driveway once again. This time, he brought a small stuffed elephant, remembering how Lily used to love animals. The toy's soft gray fur and friendly embroidered smile offered a stark contrast to the raggedy doll she'd been holding yesterday. Rachel answered his knock with the same tight smile as before. Adrien, twice in 2 days. This is becoming a habit. I'm sorry to bother you, he said, holding up his sunglasses. I think I left these here yesterday. Mind if I check? She hesitated, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the doorframe. Fine, but make it quick. The house felt different in the morning light that slipped through the heavy curtains. Less oppressive, perhaps, but still unnaturally quiet for a home with a 5-year-old. Adrien's eyes scanned the living room, noting the absence of toys, books, or any sign of childish chaos. A small movement caught his attention. Lily stood in the hallway, watching him with those same solemn eyes. She wore a different dress today, pale pink with a white collar, but her posture remained defensive, guarded. "Hi, Lily," Adrien said softly. Kneeling down to her level, he pulled out the stuffed elephant. "I brought you something." Rachel's lips tightened, but she didn't interfere as Lily took a hesitant step forward. The little girl's fingers reached out slowly, touching the elephant's fur with gentle wonder. She accepted the toy but didn't smile, holding it close to her chest alongside her button-eyed doll. "Would you like to draw with me?" Adrien asked, noticing some crayons and paper on the coffee table. Again, Rachel watched but didn't object as Lily nodded slightly and moved to the table. Adrien sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, keeping a careful distance. Lily picked up a black crayon and began to draw with deliberate strokes. 4 straight lines formed a square on the paper. "That's beautiful," Adrien encouraged. "Can you tell me what it is?" Lily glanced quickly at Rachel, who had moved to the kitchen, but stayed within sight. Then she leaned closer to Adrien, her voice barely a whisper. "My quiet box." Adrien's heart clenched. The basement. She was drawing the basement where Rachel put her for timeout. He wanted to scoop her up, to promise nothing would ever hurt her again. But he knew sudden movements might scare her. Instead, he kept his voice gentle. "Do you spend a lot of time in your quiet box?" Before Lily could answer, Rachel's voice cut through the moment. "Lily, it's time for your reading lesson. Say goodbye to your father." Lily stood immediately, clutching both the elephant and her doll. She paused just long enough to push the drawing toward Adrien before Rachel took her hand and led her away. The little girl didn't look back. Later that evening, Adrien sat in his home office, surrounded by open tabs on his computer. Articles about emotional neglect in children filled his screen. Signs of covert abuse, the impact of isolation on child development, understanding trauma responses in young kids. Each word felt like a knife twisting in his chest. Lily's drawing lay on his desk. He'd been staring at it for hours. The simple square with its 4 black lines, and inside, a small stick figure, holding what looked like her doll. The figure had no smile, no expression at all, just like Lily. His phone buzzed again, another reminder about tomorrow's board meeting, a crucial discussion about a potential merger that could net billions for the company. Adrien picked up the phone and typed a brief message. "Cancel the meeting. Personal emergency." He set the phone down and picked up the drawing again. The quiet box Lily had whispered about wasn't just a room. It was a prison. And he had helped build it by walking away. By convincing himself Rachel would be the better parent, that his absence was somehow better than his presence. Never again. He needed to see Lily again soon. Not just to check on her, but to start rebuilding the trust he'd broken, to show her she wasn't alone anymore. The board meeting could wait. Everything could wait. Right now, nothing mattered more than the little girl who drew herself inside a box. Adrien sat in his home office, turning a small audio recorder over in his hands. It was barely larger than a USB drive, but its potential impact weighed heavily on his conscience. The thought of secretly recording anyone, let alone his ex-wife, made his stomach churn. But the image of Lily's vacant eyes and that whispered quiet box steeled his resolve. He picked up the new doll, an exact replica of Lily's constant companion. Finding it had taken considerable effort and expense, but his personal shopper had tracked down the discontinued model. The next step had been trickier, making it look properly worn and aged to match Lily's original. "Be gentle with the distressing," he had told the costume artist from a local theater. "It needs to look exactly like this reference photo. Every stain, every loose thread. Now looking at the two dolls side by side, even Adrien couldn't tell them apart. The only difference was the tiny recorder carefully sewn into the new doll's stuffing, positioned near where a heart would be. His hands shook slightly as he prepared for another visit to Rachel's house. The velvet box with his mother's locket still sat unopened on his desk, a reminder of his original intention, now overshadowed by growing concern. He tucked the doctored doll into a gift bag, trying to ignore the voice in his head, questioning whether he was crossing a line. The drive to Rachel's house felt longer than usual. Adrien rehearsed his excuse. A special gift for Lily, something to match her favorite doll. Simple, plausible, the kind of gesture an absent father might make to reconnect with his child. Rachel answered the door in a crisp white blouse and tailored pants, her appearance as controlled as ever. Adrien. Her tone carried a note of warning. This is becoming too frequent. I brought something for Lily, he said, holding up the gift bag. May I give it to her? Rachel's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together, but she stepped aside. 5 minutes. The living room was still unnaturally clean, devoid of the usual chaos that comes with young children. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, her original doll clutched close as she colored with precise, careful strokes. She looked up when Adrien entered but didn't smile. Hi, sweetheart, Adrien said softly, kneeling beside her. I brought you something special. Before he could reach into the bag, Rachel's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. I need to take this. 5 minutes, Adrien. She stepped into the kitchen, her voice dropping to a professional murmur. Adrien moved quickly but calmly, not wanting to startle Lily. He reached for her doll with gentle hands. May I see your friend for a moment? I want to show you something. Lily released the doll without protest, her eyes watching him with that same unsettling stillness. Adrien made a show of comparing the two dolls, then handed her the new one, with the hidden recorder. Look, now she has a twin sister. They're exactly the same. Lily accepted the doll, holding it close just as she had the original. If she noticed any difference in weight or texture, she gave no sign. Adrien's heart raced as he quietly slipped the original doll into his jacket pocket. Lily, he said softly, glancing toward the kitchen where Rachel was still on the phone. Can you tell me more about your drawing? The quiet box? Lily's small fingers traced the doll's button eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. The lady upstairs says I'm broken. Adrien's jaw clenched so tight he could hear his teeth grind. The lady upstairs? Rachel? Someone else? He wanted to press further, but Rachel's voice was getting louder, her call wrapping up. We'll talk more soon, he promised, fighting to keep his voice steady. I'll come visit again. He left shortly after, guilt churning in his chest. The original doll felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. He had just violated his ex-wife's privacy and manipulated his daughter's trust, actions that went against everything he believed about integrity and transparency in business and life. But as he drove home, Adrien couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong in that house. The silence, the control, the whispered confessions about being broken. It all pointed to something darker than simple neglect. That night, Adrien sat in his dimly lit office, the recovered doll, on his desk. He'd already checked it for any existing recording devices, half expecting to find Rachel monitoring Lily herself. Finding nothing, he connected his recorder to his computer and pressed play. At first, there was only silence, broken occasionally by the soft sounds of Lily's breathing or quiet footsteps. Then Rachel's voice filled the room, but not as he'd ever heard it before. She was speaking in a deep, cold tone, an unsettling imitation of his own voice. You're just like your mother, the false Adrien voice sneered. Weak, needy, always wanting attention. Adrien's blood ran cold. Was this what Rachel told their daughter? That these were his words, his thoughts? The recording continued, Rachel's voice shifting to her own tone, but unstable, swinging, between gentle and harsh. Shh, it's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy will help you be better. Then, sharper. Stop crying. Do you want to go to the quiet box? Is that what you want? Lily's muffled sobs made Adrien's hands curl into fists. We'll fix you, Rachel's voice went on, softer now but somehow more frightening. Just like I fixed him. Your daddy needed fixing too. You know, he was too soft, too weak. But I helped him see. And now he's strong, isn't he? Now he knows better than to interfere. Adrien sat frozen, the words washing over him like ice water. This wasn't just emotional neglect or strict parenting. This was calculated psychological abuse. Rachel wasn't just punishing Lily, she was systematically destroying their daughter's sense of self, using his absence as a weapon. The recording played on, revealing more moments of Rachel's shifting personalities. The cold professional, the loving mother, the cruel manipulator. Each transition was seamless, practiced, as if she'd been perfecting these roles for years. With trembling fingers, Adrien stopped the playback. He couldn't listen to any more tonight. The weight of his complicity, his years of absence, his acceptance of Rachel's excuses, threatened to crush him. He had thought stepping away would give Lily a more stable life with her mother. Instead, he had abandoned her to someone who was breaking her spirit. Adrien dialed a number he hadn't used in years. As morning sunlight streamed into his office, he waited anxiously. "Dr. Chen speaking," came the warm voice. "Evelyn, it's Adrien Vale." "Adrien, it's been 3 years." "Too long," he admitted. "I need your help with my daughter." Her tone shifted to professional concern. "What's going on?" Adrien explained everything. The basement, the drawings, the recordings, Lily's silence. He described Rachel's disturbing behavior on the recording. Evelyn listened fully before responding carefully. "Adrien, this suggests serious psychological manipulation. But before we continue, anything," Adrien said. "Complete transparency," she insisted. "No hidden agendas or corporate games. Be honest about everything." Adrien hesitated. Revealing his failures as a father went against his instincts, but Lily's vacant eyes haunted him. "I understand. Full transparency." They planned for Evelyn to pose as a visiting colleague, allowing her to assess Lily naturally. That weekend, they arrived at Rachel's house casually dressed. Evelyn carried children's art supplies as a prop. Rachel answered with perfect posture, her eyes narrowing at Evelyn. "Rachel, this is Dr. Evelyn Chen," Adrien explained. "She's here for a conference and wanted to catch up." Rachel's smile was forced. "Come in." Inside, Lily sat quietly with her doctored doll. Evelyn settled near her warmly. "Hi there. I love your doll. Do you like to draw? I brought special colored pencils." Lily checked with Rachel before reaching for the pencils. "Tea?" Rachel offered, arms crossed. "Lovely," Evelyn replied. "Adrien, help Rachel. I'd love to see Lily's artistic skills." Adrien followed Rachel to the kitchen while monitoring Evelyn's interactions with Lily. When they returned, Lily was drawing intently. Her picture showed a house with orange-red flames and black windows. No smoke rose from the eerily still scene. "Who lives here?" Evelyn asked gently. Lily glanced at Rachel before pointing to a tiny figure in a window. "The ghost girl," she whispered. Rachel's teacup clinked. "Lily has quite an imagination. Let's put the drawing away." "Just a few more minutes?" Evelyn asked pleasantly, but Lily had withdrawn, staring vacantly at her doll. Rachel stood abruptly. "We have plans. Lovely meeting you, Dr. Chen." Outside, Evelyn's professional demeanor gave way to concern. "Adrien, this confirms your fears and worse." At a nearby park, Adrien held his mother's locket. As Evelyn explained, Lily shows clear signs of dissociation, a trauma response. Her ghost girl reference, selective mutism, and constant checking for Rachel's approval are all red flags for psychological manipulation. The burning house is a cry for help. She feels trapped, even non-existent. The black windows and unnatural flames express profound isolation. Evelyn touched his arm. Act carefully. Rachel maintains a highly controlled environment. Sudden moves could harm Lily. What do I do? Document everything, recordings, drawings, my observations. Build a methodical case and involve authorities at the right time. But Adrien, she waited until he met her gaze. This will be a tough battle. Rachel won't surrender control easily. Adrien stared at the velvet box, now representing both his failures and his promise to make things right. The next morning dawned bright, contrasting Adrien's heavy thoughts. He rehearsed before calling Rachel. I'd like to take Lily out for her birthday this weekend, just the two of us. After a long pause, Rachel responded, That's unexpected. Where would you take her? The botanical gardens, maybe the children's museum. Nothing overwhelming. I suppose that's acceptable, she conceded. But back before dinner, and regular updates. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather. Adrien waited as his driver, Thompson, pulled up to Rachel's house. Through tinted windows, he watched Rachel lead Lily down the steps, gripping her hand tightly. Lily wore a pale blue dress, eyes fixed downward, twisting the fabric of her skirt nervously. Good morning, Lily, he said softly as she climbed in. At the gardens, Adrien matched Lily's tentative pace. She became fascinated by the koi pond. Would you like to feed them? He asked, buying fish food. When the first fish swooped up, her eyes widened in delight. At the museum, Lily grew more relaxed. In the art room, she carefully painted a small clay fox with surprising detail. That's beautiful, he said. You're quite the artist. Her cheeks flushed pink. During lunch, Lily finally spoke. Would it be okay if I called you Dad? Adrien's heart skipped. Yes, he managed. I would love that very much. Lily smiled slightly and began drawing. The familiar burning house appeared, but this time with two figures, one reaching toward the other from outside. Above them, a bright sun pushed against the darkness. Is that us? Adrien asked. Lily nodded, drawing with more confidence. As they drove back, Lily sat close, clutching her doll and drawing. The monster doesn't like the locket, she whispered. Adrien considered the velvet box in his desk drawer. Could it have triggered Rachel's spiral? He kissed Lily's forehead. No more monsters, he promised. Not ever again. Lily's small hand found his, and he held it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Rachel's front lawn as Thompson's SUV pulled up to the house. Adrien checked his watch and grimaced. They were 30 minutes late, caught in unexpected traffic from a minor accident on the highway. Through the tinted windows, he could see Rachel's rigid silhouette waiting at the front door, arms crossed tightly over her chest. I'm sorry we're late, Adrien said as he helped Lily out of the car. There was an accident. Rachel's face was a mask of barely contained fury. She strode forward, grabbing Lily's arm with enough force to make the child stumble. Get inside, now! Rachel, please, Adrien started, but the door slammed in his face with such force that the welcome wreath bounced against the wood. Through the door, he could hear Rachel's muffled voice rising in sharp, angry bursts. Adrien stood there for a long moment, his hand half raised to knock. But what good would that do? He'd already pushed his luck today. With a heavy heart, he returned to the car, watching the house until Thompson pulled away from the curb. The next morning dawned gray and humid. Adrien was reviewing quarterly reports in his home office when his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his PR team. The subject line made his blood run cold. Breaking news. Immediate response needed. His hands shook slightly as he opened the attached media clips. There it was, his face splashed across multiple news sites alongside headlines that made his stomach lurch. Tech billionaire Adrien Vale, under investigation for child abduction. Custody battle turns criminal. Mother claims tech mogul violated. Agreement. Breaking. Vale Industries CEO faces questions over daughter's extended outing. The stories all quoted sources close to the situation, claiming Adrien had deliberately kept Lily overtime to distress her mother, that he had taken her across state lines. He hadn't, that he had attempted to alienate her from Rachel. It was a masterwork of manipulation and half-truths, carefully crafted to paint him as an unstable threat. His phone rang. His lawyer, Marcus Chen. "Adrien, don't speak to anyone. We're handling this, but you need to come in. The police want to question you." The precinct was a stark contrast to Adrien's usual environments. The interview room's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Detective Sarah Martinez laid out the allegations. Adrien answered each question calmly, presenting Thompson's driving logs, timestamps from the museum's security cameras, and receipts from every stop they'd made. "So you maintain this was simply a traffic delay?" Martinez asked, studying his face. "Yes. We were caught behind an accident on Highway 27. You can verify the incident with traffic control." The detective nodded slowly. "Mr. Vale, while I believe you're being truthful about yesterday's events, there's another matter we need to discuss. Your ex-wife has filed for an emergency custody review, citing this incident as evidence of potential flight risk." Adrien's lawyer leaned forward. "My client has fully complied with all custody arrangements. Nevertheless," Martinez continued, "the court has issued a temporary order barring contact with the minor child pending review. I'm sorry, but you'll need to stay away from both mother and daughter until this is resolved." The words hit Adrien like a physical blow. "She's my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. Marcus touched his arm lightly. "Adrien, we need to discuss something." He waited until Detective Martinez left the room. "The custody agreement you signed 2 years ago, it's going to complicate things." Adrien closed his eyes, remembering that dark period. He'd been in the middle of a mental breakdown, drowning in work and guilt over his failing marriage. When Rachel had pushed for full custody, he'd signed without fighting, believing Lily deserved better than a father who couldn't even take care of himself. "You gave Rachel complete custodial rights," Marcus continued gently. "Any violation, even perceived ones, can be treated as a serious offense. We'll fight this, but it's going to take time." The ride back to his penthouse passed in a blur. Adrien stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city. Lights flickered to life as dusk settled over the skyline. On his desk lay Lily's drawing of the burning house with its 2 figures, one reaching for the other. Beside it sat the mended doll, its button eyes seeming to watch him with silent sympathy. With trembling fingers, Adrien retrieved the audio recorder from inside the doll. He hadn't had time to fully analyze the recording yet. Settling into his chair, he opened a blank document and pressed play. Rachel's voice filled the room, first soft and sweet, then shifting to a cruel mimicry of his own. "Your daddy left because you're broken. He couldn't stand to look at you." Then her own voice again, unstable and rambling. "We'll fix you, won't we? Just like I fixed him. He needed to learn, and so do you." The sound of Lily crying quietly made Adrien's hands clench into fists. Rachel again. "Shh, shh, no tears. You know what happens when you cry? Do you want to go to the quiet box? Is that what you want?" Adrien forced himself to keep listening, documenting every word, every shift in tone, every instance of Lily's frightened responses. Hours passed as he built a timeline, cross-referencing dates and events, noting patterns in Rachel's behavior. Something about the way Rachel spoke of fixing them bothered him. It stirred a memory, something she'd said years ago about her time in college, about a rough patch she'd gotten through. He'd never pressed for details, respecting her privacy. Now he wondered if that had been a mistake. Opening his laptop, Adrien began searching through old records. Rachel's medical history would be private, but there had to be other traces: newspaper archives, university records, anything that might shed light on her past. He had resources, connections, and, most importantly, motivation. Somewhere in Rachel's history lay the key to understanding what was happening now. The doll sat on his desk, its mismatched buttons reflecting the blue light of his screen. Lily's drawing seemed to glow in the dim room, the stick figures a stark reminder of what was at stake. Rachel was unraveling. He could hear it in every recording, see it in every interaction. And Lily was trapped with her, enduring God knows what torments while the legal system crawled forward at its own pace. Adrien pulled up his secure email and began composing messages to trusted contacts. He needed to understand what had shaped Rachel into who she was now. Someone, somewhere, had to have documented her decline. He would find it, document it, and prove what no one else seemed willing to see. His daughter was in danger, and time was running out. Adrien sat in his study, staring at his phone. The morning light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across his desk. He'd been avoiding this call, knowing it would force him to confront more painful truths about his past failures. But Lily's safety came first. Taking a deep breath, he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Hello," came the familiar voice, warm but cautious. "Marta, it's Adrien Vale." There was a pause. "Mr. Vale, it's been a long time." Adrien's fingers drummed nervously on his desk. "Too long, I hope I'm not disturbing you." No, I was just finishing my morning coffee." Her accent was still strong despite decades in America. "Is this about little Lily?" The question caught him off guard. "How did you know?" "I watched the news, Mr. Vale, and I remember things, many things." Adrien leaned forward in his chair. "That's actually why I'm calling. When you worked for us before and after Lily was born, did you notice anything unusual about Rachel?" The silence stretched for several seconds. When Marta spoke again, her voice was lower, more serious. "The attic." "What about it?" "After the baby came, Mrs. Vale would spend hours up there. Sometimes I'd hear her talking to herself, but when I brought her tea, she'd lock the door. She said she needed privacy to organize her thoughts." Adrien's pen hovered over his notepad. "Did she ever mention what she kept up there?" "Once." Marta's voice grew thoughtful. "She was very upset that day. The baby had been crying for hours. She said something about needing to check her letterbox for protection. I thought it was strange, but it wasn't my place to ask." Adrien wrote quickly, his handwriting barely legible. "Did you ever see this box?" "No. But after that day she got real particular about the attic. No one was allowed up there, not even you. Do you remember?" He did remember. He'd been so consumed with work then, he'd dismissed it as new mother anxiety. Another failure, to add to his growing list. "Thank you, Marta. You've been very helpful." "Mr. Vale," her voice stopped him before he could hang up. "The little one. She drew pictures, beautiful pictures. But sometimes they were dark, very dark. I should have said something then." "We all should have," Adrien replied, softly. After ending the call, Adrien contacted his lawyer. As expected, several items belonging to his late mother were still stored in Rachel's attic, items he had a legal right to claim. Within hours, Marcus had arranged a supervised visit for retrieval. The next afternoon, Adrien stood on Rachel's doorstep again, this time with a court-appointed supervisor and his lawyer. Rachel answered wearing a perfectly pressed blouse and an artificial smile. "This isn't necessary," she said, her voice tight. "I would have shipped them to you." "I prefer to select them myself," Adrien replied evenly. "It won't take long." Rachel's phone buzzed, and she checked it with obvious agitation. "Fine, make it quick. I have an appointment." As they entered, Adrien caught sight of Lily sitting in the living room. She was coloring, but her eyes darted up to meet his while Rachel spoke with the supervisor. Lily slowly stood and walked over to him. "Hi, Dad," she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. Adrien's heart clenched. He wanted nothing more than to scoop her up and run, but he forced himself to stay composed. "Hi, sweetheart." Lily glanced quickly at Rachel, who was still distracted by her phone, then pressed something into Adrien's hand. It was a small plastic key, probably from a toy set. "It opens her secret things," Lily whispered, then quickly returned to her coloring. Rachel led them upstairs to the attic access. 20 minutes, she said firmly. "I'll be right back. I need to make a call." The attic was stuffy and dim, filled with boxes and old furniture. Adrien moved purposefully toward the area where his mother's belongings were stored, but his eyes scanned every corner, every shadow. The supervisor stayed near the entrance, looking bored. As Adrien shifted some boxes, his hand brushed against something under a layer of insulation. Hidden from casual view was an old wooden box about the size of a shoebox, with a small brass keyhole. His heart quickened. Carefully, he placed the box inside a larger one containing his mother's photo albums. The supervisor barely glanced at the items Adrien selected, more interested in his phone than the task at hand. Back in his penthouse that evening, Adrien sat at his desk, staring at the wooden box. The toy key Lily had given him lay beside it, looking impossibly small and plastic, but when he inserted it into the lock, it turned with a soft click. Inside, beneath a layer of tissue paper, lay 7 sealed envelopes. They were addressed to Rachel from Dr. Thomas Bennett, dated across 3 years, starting shortly before Lily's birth. Each envelope was marked personal and confidential. Treatment summary. Adrien's hands trembled slightly as he opened the first letter. The letter had identified Dr. Bennett as a specialist in personality disorders and maternal mental health. As he read, his throat grew tight. Dear Rachel, I am deeply concerned about your decision to discontinue treatment. Your symptoms of borderline personality disorder have shown significant escalation during pregnancy, and I strongly advise against stopping medication. The second letter was dated 2 months after Lily's birth. Your descriptions of feeling hollow and infected by your daughter's presence are clear indicators of postpartum psychosis. These delusions, combined with your underlying BPD, create a potentially dangerous situation. Adrien read through each letter methodically, scanning every page with his phone as he went. The final letter, dated just 6 months ago, made his blood run cold. Rachel, your recent statements about Lily being tainted by your ex-husband's emotional neglect are extremely troubling. Your belief that she must be emptied through enforced silence represents a severe escalation of your condition. I cannot emphasize strongly enough the need for immediate intervention. Adrien laid the letters out on his desk, his legal pad, filled with notes. Each page documented Rachel's declining mental state, her refusal of treatment, her growing fixation on purifying Lily through isolation and psychological manipulation. The doctor had tried repeatedly to reach her, but Rachel had simply collected the letters and hidden them away, perhaps as proof she was the one being persecuted. He carefully returned the original letters to their envelopes, placing them back in the box exactly as he'd found them. The scanned copies were already uploading to his secure server. After 2 years of helplessness, he finally had concrete evidence of the danger Lily faced every day. The toy key glinted in the lamplight as Adrien picked it up. Such a small thing, given by a child wise beyond her years. Lily had known, had probably always known, exactly where Rachel kept her secrets. She'd been waiting for someone to listen. Adrien sat in the polished conference room of his legal team's office, surrounded by carefully arranged evidence. The morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany table where photographs of Lily's drawings lay spread out like dark butterflies. Beside them sat the recovered letters, the audio transcripts, and a laptop ready to play the recordings. Marcus Chen, his lead attorney, studied each piece with methodical precision, while Evelyn took notes on her tablet, her expression growing more concerned with each passing minute. The room remained silent except for the soft scratch of pen on paper and the occasional tap of keys. Play the recording again, Evelyn requested, her voice steady but tight. The section from last Tuesday. Adrien pressed play. Rachel's voice filled the room, first mimicking Adrien's tone in a cruel parody, then shifting to her own, a disturbing dance between sweetness and venom. Evelyn's pen moved faster. The power. Vocal patterns are textbook indicators of dissociative episodes, she explained, looking up from her notes. The switching between personas, the emotional incongruity. It matches perfectly with the progression documented in Dr. Bennett's letters. Marcus nodded, arranging the letters chronologically. The documentation of her refusal to continue treatment is particularly damning. Combined with these recordings and the psychological impact evident in Lily's artwork, he gestured to the drawings. We have a solid case for emergency intervention. Evelyn picked up one of Lily's recent drawings, the burning house with its stick figure inhabitants. This repetitive imagery of fire and containment suggests a severe trauma response. The ghost girl reference, the quiet box. These are sophisticated metaphors for a 5-year-old. Children this age typically develop coping mechanisms through symbolism when direct expression feels unsafe. She began typing rapidly on her laptop, her professional demeanor masking the emotion in her voice. I'll prepare a detailed affidavit, outlining the psychological evidence of Rachel's deteriorating condition and its impact on Lily's development. The combination of untreated borderline personality disorder and postpartum psychosis creates a particularly volatile situation. Her fixation on purifying Lily through isolation indicates dangerous escalation. Adrien watched as his old friend transformed years of clinical experience into a powerful testimony. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, building a comprehensive analysis that would help free his daughter from the darkness she'd been living in. Marcus gathered the evidence into separate folders, each carefully labeled. We'll file for an emergency custody hearing first thing tomorrow morning. With Dr. Chen's affidavit, the audio evidence, and these letters, we have more than enough to justify immediate court intervention. The next 48 hours passed in eye, a blur of legal procedures and careful documentation. When Adrien finally stood before Judge Miranda Santos, the weight of the evidence spoke volumes. The judge reviewed each piece with careful consideration, her expression growing graver as she progressed through the files. Given the severity of the psychological documentation and the clear evidence of escalating behavioral instability, Judge Santos declared, I am approving a formal investigation into this matter. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary restraining order against Rachel Vale and granting supervised visitation rights to Adrien Vale, effective immediately. The next morning, Adrien's car pulled up to Lily's elementary school. A court-appointed supervisor sat in the passenger seat, reviewing the paperwork one final time. Adrien's heart pounded as he watched the stream of children flowing out of the building's double doors. Then he saw her. Lily emerged, wearing a yellow backpack almost as big as she was, her dark hair in slightly messy pigtails. She scanned the crowd of waiting parents, and when her eyes found Adrien, her whole face lit up. Without hesitation, she ran toward him, her backpack bouncing with each step. Adrien knelt down, opening his arms just as Lily crashed into him with the full force of her small body. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her close, breathing in the scent of crayons and classroom glue that clung to her clothes. Hi, Dad, she whispered against his neck, and Adrien had to swallow, hard past the lump in his throat. Hi, sweetheart, he managed to reply, his voice rough with emotion. Movement caught his eye, and he looked up to see Rachel standing at the edge of the school grounds, just beyond the restraining orders, permitted distance. Her face was tight with barely contained fury, her eyes wild and unfocused. She made no move to approach, but her gaze never left them as Adrien helped Lily into the car. The drive to Adrien's penthouse was filled with Lily's soft chatter about her day, more words than he'd heard from her in the past year combined. She told him about art class, about the class hamster named Pickle, about the story her teacher had read at circle time. Adrien listened to every word like it was precious music. That evening, after dinner and a bubble bath, Lily sat cross-legged on Adrien's living room floor, surrounded by new colored pencils and fresh paper. She drew with intense concentration, her tongue sticking out slightly at the corner of her mouth. Adrien sat nearby on the couch, pretending to read, but actually watching her create. The steady scratch of pencils and the soft glow of lamps filled the room with peaceful quiet, so different from the oppressive silence of Rachel's house. Gradually, Lily's movement slowed, her head nodding slightly as she worked. Just one more thing, she mumbled, adding a final touch to her drawing. Then she carefully carried it to Adrien's office, where he'd hung her previous artwork, in simple frames. This one goes here, she declared sleepily. Adrien helped her pin it up, noting with surprise that it showed the same burning house from her previous drawings. But this time, the flames were gone. In their place stood a garden with flowers and 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands beneath a bright sun. When he returned to the living room, Lily had curled up on the couch, her worn doll clutched against her chest. Her eyes were closed, her breathing deep and even. Adrien carefully draped a soft blanket over her, tucking it gently around her shoulders. He stood there for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in his presence. The penthouse was quiet, but not with the suffocating silence he'd witnessed in Rachel's basement. This quiet was warm, safe, filled with the gentle hum of the heating system and the distant city sounds far below. The framed drawing in his office caught his eye again. The house without flames, the garden blooming where destruction had once been. Adrien felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen, like a knot finally coming undone. The courtroom's oak-paneled walls seemed to absorb the morning light, casting long shadows across the polished benches. Adrien sat straight-backed beside his legal team, his fingers absently touching the velvet box in his pocket that still held his mother's locket. Across the aisle, Rachel perched at her table, wearing a cream-colored suit that made her look almost luminescent in the filtered sunlight. Her hands were folded neatly on the table, but her fingers twitched occasionally, betraying the tension beneath her composed exterior. Judge Santos entered, and the bailiff's voice rang out clear and firm. "All rise. The Court of Family Services is now in session, the Honorable Judge Miranda Santos presiding." As they took their seats again, Adrien glanced toward the door, knowing that just down the hall, Lily was safe in the courthouse's supervised playroom, with Evelyn. He'd seen her earlier that morning, her small hand clutching her doll as she followed the court guardian into the cheerful space filled with toys and books. Marcus stood first, his voice steady as he addressed the court. "Your Honor, we're here today presenting evidence of severe psychological abuse and endangerment of a minor, Lily Vale, age 5, by her mother, Rachel Vale. We have substantial documentation demonstrating Mrs. Vale's untreated mental illness and its devastating impact on her daughter." Rachel's attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Catherine Brennan, objected immediately. "Your Honor, these allegations are baseless attempts by Mr. Vale to circumvent the existing custody agreement he willingly signed." Judge Santos held up her hand. "Objection noted, Ms. Brennan. However, I'll hear the evidence. Mr. Chen, proceed." Marcus began methodically presenting their case. The letters from Rachel's psychiatrist appeared on the courtroom's display screen, each one highlighting increasingly concerning behaviors. Rachel's leg began bouncing beneath the table as her treatment history was laid bare. These letters, discovered in Mrs. Vale's attic, document a pattern of untreated borderline personality disorder and postpartum psychosis, Marcus explained. Dr. Bennett repeatedly urged Mrs. Vale to continue treatment, expressing particular concern about her dissociative episodes and their potential impact on her infant daughter. Rachel's attorney stood again. "Your Honor, there's no proof these letters are authentic. They could easily be fabricated." "We have Dr. Bennett's sworn affidavit confirming their authenticity," Marcus countered, presenting another document. "Additionally, we have audio evidence of Mrs. Vale's current psychological state." The recording began to play. Rachel's voice filled the courtroom, switching between cruel mimicry of Adrien and her own unstable tones. The real Rachel stiffened in her chair as she heard herself alternately comforting and berating Lily, her words about fixing her daughter echoing off the wooden walls. "This recording was obtained legally through a monitoring device," Marcus explained, after Mr. Vale observed concerning behavior during supervised visits. Rachel's composure began to crack, her hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white against the polished table surface. That's not what happened," she interrupted, her voice tight. "He's manipulating everything, just like he always does." "Mrs. Vale, please allow your counsel to speak for you," Judge Santos warned. Marcus continued, "By presenting Evelyn's psychological evaluation." Dr. Chen's professional assessment appeared on screen, accompanied by Lily's drawings, the burning house, the quiet box, the ghost girl. Each image was paired with Evelyn's analysis of the trauma indicators they revealed. "Dr. Chen has extensive experience in child psychology and trauma," Marcus explained, Her evaluation indicates severe emotional abuse and psychological manipulation. Rachel's breathing became audible, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Those are just drawings," she snapped. "Kids draw silly things all the time. The free." Court guardian brought in a tablet showing video footage from Lily's supervised sessions with Evelyn. On screen, Lily's small voice described the lady upstairs, who said mean things in Daddy's voice, and the quiet box where she had to stay until she was empty enough. Something in Rachel seemed to splinter. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You don't understand," she shouted, her voice rising hysterically. "She's not even real. She's just a copy of him." The courtroom froze. Rachel's attorney tried to grab her arm, but Rachel jerked away violently. "She's not my daughter. She's just his reflection, his perfect little mirror. I had to empty her out, had to make her clean again." "Mrs. Vale." Judge Santos's gavel cracked against the wooden block. "Control yourself, or you will. Be removed from this courtroom." But Rachel was beyond hearing. Her face had contorted, all pretense of composure shattered. "She's not real! She's not real! She's not real!" she screamed, her voice reaching a fever pitch. "She's just his ghost, his shadow. I had to fix her, had to make her pure again." Two court officers moved quickly toward Rachel. As Judge Santos ordered, "Remove Mrs. Vale immediately and have her taken for psychiatric evaluation. This court hereby orders her remanded to a secure mental health facility for immediate treatment." As Rachel was led away, still shouting about shadows and ghosts, Judge Santos's voice cut through the chaos. "Based on the evidence presented and Mrs. Vale's concerning behavior, this court grants temporary full custody of Lily Vale to her father, Adrien Vale, pending final review. Mrs. Vale will have no contact with the minor child until she has undergone complete psychiatric evaluation and treatment." The judge's gavel fell one final time, the sound echoing with finality through the now quiet courtroom. Adrien sat still for a moment, his heart pounding as the reality of what had just happened sank in. His daughter was safe. She was coming home. The door to the courtroom opened, and Lily burst through, breaking away from Evelyn's gentle grip. Her face lit up as she spotted Adrien, and she ran toward him, her small shoes clicking against the wooden floor. Adrien dropped to one knee, opening his arms just as Lily crashed into him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding on tight. "Daddy," she whispered against his shoulder. And Adrien felt tears prick at his eyes as he held his daughter close, knowing that this time he wouldn't have to let her go. Adrien led Lily down the sunlit hallway of his penthouse, her small hand wrapped trustingly in his. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warm patterns across the plush carpet. He'd spent the past week preparing this moment, transforming the spare bedroom into a space worthy of his daughter. "Close your eyes," Adrien said softly, pausing at a white door decorated with hand-painted butterflies. Lily squeezed her, eyes shut, her free hand clutching her ever-present doll. Adrien turned the handle and guided her inside. "Okay, you can look now." Lily's eyes fluttered open. She stood frozen in the doorway, taking in the sight before her. The room was bathed in gentle natural light from large windows dressed with flowing cream curtains. Soft pink and lavender walls created a peaceful atmosphere, while twinkling fairy lights draped across the ceiling cast a magical glow. A cozy window seat was piled high with cushions, perfect for reading or daydreaming. In one corner stood an art station with an easel, fresh paper, and every kind of art supply imaginable. Colored pencils, markers, paints, and modeling clay. Beside it, a child-sized desk held new coloring books and a rainbow array of crayons. Shelves lined with picture books and chapter books covered one wall, while another featured a dollhouse that nearly reached Adrien's waist. A plush white carpet covered the floor, dotted with comfortable beanbags in pastel colors. The bed was a dream of soft whites and purples, topped with a gauzy canopy that floated down like a cloud. Stuffed animals of all sizes were arranged on the bed, waiting for hugs. Lily remained motionless in the doorway, her eyes wide as they darted from one wonder to the next. Her grip on her doll tightened slightly. "No stairs," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Adrien knelt beside her, his heart aching at the question. No stairs, he confirmed gently. No basement either. Just this bright, happy room, right here on the same floor as my bedroom. Lily took a tentative step forward, then another. She reached out to touch a stuffed elephant sitting on the bed as if checking whether it was real. Is it all for me? She asked, her voice still hushed with disbelief. All of it, Adrien assured her. Every single thing in this room is yours, sweetheart. You can play with whatever you want, whenever you want. Over the next few days, Adrien rarely left Lily's side. He worked remotely, setting up his laptop at her art station while she drew or painted. He watched as she slowly began to explore her new space, testing boundaries with careful curiosity. Each time she discovered she could freely access her toys or books without permission, her confidence grew a little more. At bedtime, Lily would curl up in her new bed, her doll tucked safely beside her. Adrien would sit in the comfortable chair next to her bed, listening as she began to share stories in her soft voice. They always featured the same character, a dragon who lived in darkness. The dragon was sad all the time, she would whisper, her fingers playing with the edge of her blanket. He couldn't find his way out of the dark cave. But then she'd pause, thinking carefully. Then he found a magic crayon, and he drew a door made of sunshine. Adrien documented these stories carefully in a notebook, sharing them with Evelyn during their regular check-ins. Evelyn began visiting the penthouse 3 times a week, conducting gentle therapy sessions that looked more like playtime to casual observers. She would sit with Lily at the art station, asking questions about her drawings and listening intently to the answers. During one session, Lily drew what she called her dream house. It was unlike her previous drawings of burning buildings or dark boxes. This house had windows made of yellow sunbeams and walls that sparkled with stars. It's a house made of sunlight, Lily explained to Evelyn, adding more yellow to the picture. So the dark can't ever get inside. Adrien watched these sessions from a respectful distance, his heart swelling as he saw his daughter slowly emerging from her shell. She began to laugh more, to play more freely, to express her needs and wants in clear words rather than whispers. One evening, as Adrien was helping Lily arrange her stuffed animals for bedtime, she paused in her task. She stood very still, clutching her doll, the same one that had once carried the recording that helped save her. Her voice was small but steady when she spoke. Can I call you Dad again?" Adrien's throat tightened with emotion. He remembered the first time she'd asked this question during their day at the botanical garden. This time felt different, more permanent, more sure. He smiled warmly at his daughter, his voice gentle but firm. "Only if I can call you my everything." Lily's face broke into a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made them sparkle. She nodded, then surprised him by stepping forward to wrap her arms around his neck in a tight hug. That night, as Adrien tucked her into bed, he noticed something different about her expression. She seemed more relaxed, more present. The mended doll took its usual place beside her on the pillow, but Lily's grip on it was looser, more comfortable rather than desperate. "Ready for sleep?" Adrien asked, his hand hovering over the light switch as it always did. Usually this was when Lily would ask for the lights to stay on, as she had every night since coming home. But tonight, Lily looked at the warm glow of her fairy lights. Then, back at Adrien. "You'll be close by?" she asked. "Right down the hall," he assured her. "I'll leave my door open, and you can come get me anytime you need to." Lily nodded, snuggling deeper into her covers. "Then I think the big light can go off tonight." Adrien's hand stilled on the switch. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" "Yes," Lily said softly but firmly. "The fairy lights will keep the dark away." Adrien leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Good night, my everything." "Good night, Dad," Lily whispered back. With gentle care, Adrien switched off the overhead light. The room remained softly lit by the twinkling fairy lights, casting a peaceful glow over Lily's face. He watched from the doorway as her eyes drifted closed, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of sleep. The mended doll rested beside her on the pillow, watching over her dreams. Adrien stood in the sterile hallway of Meadowbrook Mental Health Center, his footsteps echoing against the polished floors. A week had passed since the court hearing, and the facility's calm atmosphere felt worlds away from that chaotic day. In his hand, he carried a manila envelope containing the court documents and his mother's gold locket, the same one that had sparked this journey. The nurse led him through security doors, her key card beeping softly at each checkpoint. Ms. Vale has been responding well to treatment, she explained in hushed tones. The medication has helped stabilize her mood. She's more present now. Adrien nodded, his expression neutral. The halls grew quieter as they moved deeper into the facility. Soft classical music drifted from somewhere distant, mixing with the gentle hum of air conditioning. They stopped at a door marked Visiting Room 3. She's agreed to see you, the nurse said, checking her clipboard. But please understand, this is still early in her treatment. We've had to adjust her medication several times to find the right balance. Inside, Rachel sat at a simple table, her hands folded in her lap. She looked different, smaller somehow, without the fierce energy that had dominated her presence before. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore soft, gray facility-issued clothes. When she looked up at Adrien, her eyes were clear but distant, like looking through clean glass at a faraway scene. "Hello, Rachel," Adrien said quietly, taking the seat across from her. He placed the envelope and locket on the table between them but didn't open either one. "Adrien." Her voice was steady but flat, a side effect of the medication, perhaps. "They told me you might come." She glanced at the items on the table. "Is that the court file?" He nodded. "And the locket." Rachel's fingers twitched slightly at the mention of the jewelry, but she didn't reach for it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Through the room's window, afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the table. "How is she?" Rachel finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's safe," Adrien replied. Simply, "She's drawing again. Different pictures now." Rachel nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on a point just past Adrien's shoulder. "I hear them less now," she said. "The voices. The medication helps." She paused, swallowing hard. "They weren't real, were they? Your voice telling me those things?" Adrien leaned forward slightly, his expression softening. "What things, Rachel?" "That I wasn't enough. That I never could be." Her words came out in short, controlled bursts, as if she'd rehearsed them with her therapist. "After Lily was born, it got worse. I'd hear you, not really you, I know that now, saying I was worthless, that she would replace me, just like she replaced everything else in our life." Understanding dawned across Adrien's features. "You resented her," he said quietly. "Not for who she was, but for who you thought I wanted her to be." Rachel's eyes drifted to the locket. "When you brought that, it was like opening a door I'd locked years ago. All the voices came rushing back, your mother's disappointment, your absence, my own failures." She drew a shaky breath. "I convinced myself Lily was the problem. If I could just fix her, make her quiet like you were. But that wasn't real either, was it?" Adrien watched as Rachel's carefully constructed walls crumbled under the weight of her confession. The woman before him wasn't the monster he'd imagined these past weeks. She was broken, lost in a maze of her own mind's making. "Doctors say it's called projection," Rachel continued, her voice growing distant again. "I projected everything I feared about myself, about us, onto her. And then the postpartum psychosis. It made everything so much worse." She looked down at her hands. "I never meant to hurt her. I thought I was protecting her from becoming empty like I felt." Adrien reached for the locket, its gold surface catching the afternoon light. He turned it over in his hands once before, placing it deliberately on the table in front of Rachel. "She's not me," he said firmly but gently. "She's just Lily. And she's safe now." Rachel stared at the locket for a long moment, then turned away, her shoulders slumping slightly. No more words passed between them. The silence felt different now, not charged with anger or fear, but heavy with acceptance and a strange kind of peace. Adrien stood quietly, gathering the court file, but leaving the locket where it lay. As he reached the door, he paused, looking back at Rachel's turned figure. The afternoon sun cast her shadow long across the floor, but it no longer seemed threatening, just sad and very human. Outside the facility, Adrien stood for a moment in the parking lot, breathing in deeply. The air felt clearer somehow, as if a fog he hadn't even noticed had finally lifted. The weight of old guilt and new anger had dissolved, leaving behind something simpler. Understanding, perhaps, or just acceptance of what couldn't be changed. He got into his car and sat there briefly, watching the sun play through the trees that lined the facility's driveway. The visit hadn't brought the closure he'd expected, but something else instead, a kind of peace he hadn't known he was seeking. With steady hands, he started the engine and began the drive home, leaving behind the echoes of the past in that quiet room with its long afternoon shadows. Autumn sunlight streamed through the large windows of Adrien's home, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floors. 3 months had passed since the courthouse, and the house had transformed from a pristine showcase into a living, breathing home. Crayon drawings decorated the refrigerator, small shoes lined the entryway, and the sound of childish giggles often echoed through the once silent halls. In Lily's room, artwork covered nearly every available surface. Gone were the dark images of burning houses and lonely stick figures. Instead, vibrant watercolor trees reached toward painted skies, carefully drawn animals frolicked across pages, and silver glitter stars sparkled on blue construction paper. Her latest masterpiece, a family of foxes playing under a rainbow, held pride of place above her desk. The mended doll that had once been her constant companion now sat peacefully by the window, watching over the room like a gentle guardian. Lily still glanced at it occasionally, but she no longer clutched it like a lifeline. These days her hands were too busy holding paintbrushes, pressing piano keys, or reaching for her father's hand. The piano had been an unexpected discovery. One afternoon, Lily had wandered over to the grand piano in the living room, a decorative piece Adrien had inherited but never played, and pressed a single key. The note rang clear and true through the house, and Lily's eyes had lit up with wonder. Now she took lessons twice a week, her small fingers growing more confident with each passing day. In the kitchen, morning light painted everything in soft gold as Adrien stood at the stove, carefully flipping pancakes. The domesticity of the scene would have been unthinkable to him just months ago. A billionaire tech investor in a casual t-shirt and jeans, making breakfast on a Tuesday morning. But here he was, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Lily sat at the kitchen island, her legs swinging freely from the high stool. She wore her favorite purple dress, her dark hair neatly braided after weeks of Adrien practicing with YouTube tutorials, and she chatted animatedly about her plans for the day. "And then in art class we're gonna make clay animals," she explained, her hands moving expressively. "Miss Thompson says we can paint them next week when they're dry. I think I'll make an elephant because they're smart and kind. Just like—" She stopped suddenly, her head tilting to one side as she studied her father. Adrien looked up from the pancakes, noticing her pause. "Just like what, sweetheart?" "You're not the cold one anymore," Lily said simply, as if commenting on the weather. Adrien felt something warm bloom in his chest. He set down the spatula and turned to face his daughter fully. "Because you warmed me up," he replied, his voice soft with affection. Their eyes met, and suddenly they were both laughing. Real, genuine laughter that filled the kitchen with joy. Lily's giggles mixed with Adrien's deeper chuckles, creating a melody sweeter than any piano piece. The day passed in a comfortable rhythm of school, work calls taken from home, piano practice, and dinner together. As evening settled over the house, Adrien followed their now familiar bedtime routine. Lily changed into her star-patterned pajamas, brushed her teeth, counting to 60 like the dentist showed her, and climbed into bed. Adrien sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing the colorful quilt over her small form. The nightlight cast a gentle glow across the room, turning the artwork on the walls into shadowy masterpieces. Lily looked up at him, her eyes heavy with sleep but clear and peaceful. "The monster's gone," she whispered, her voice carrying no fear, only a child's simple observation. Adrien stroked her hair gently, choosing his words with care. "She was just very sick," he answered softly, acknowledging the truth while protecting Lily's capacity for compassion. Lily nodded, accepting this explanation with the wisdom that sometimes seemed beyond her years. Her eyes drifted closed, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of sleep. Adrien stayed for a moment longer, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her chest, still sometimes amazed by the miracle of having her here, safe and whole. Finally, he stood and made his way, quietly to the door. He paused there, looking back at his sleeping daughter. The mended doll sat in its place by the window, bathed in moonlight, its button eyes reflecting the gentle glow of the nightlight. It was no longer a spy or a protector, just a beloved toy, carrying memories but no more burdens. Adrien climbed the stairs to his office, his footsteps silent on the carpeted treads. The room, once his fortress of solitude, had softened somehow. Family photos now shared space with business awards, and Lily's artwork brightened one entire wall. But it was the items on his desk that drew his attention. Two frames sat side by side, telling the story of their journey in silent eloquence. The first contained Lily's drawing of the basement, 4 black lines enclosing a small, lonely figure. The second held his mother's gold locket, mounted carefully against dark velvet. Together, they represented both the darkness they had emerged from and the legacy they were rebuilding. Adrien moved to the desk and switched off the lamp. Darkness fell softly around him, but it wasn't the oppressive darkness of isolation he had known for so many years. This darkness was gentle, wrapping around him like a comfortable blanket. The house settled into its nighttime quiet, not the hollow silence of emptiness, but the peaceful quiet of a home where love dwelled and healing had taken root. For the first time in as long as he could remember, the quiet didn't echo with regret or loneliness. The house was whole, just as they were whole, father and daughter, healing and growing together. In the darkness of his office, Adrien smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of pancakes, piano lessons, and the countless small moments that had become his greatest treasure. If you enjoyed the story of Adrien and Lily, I've handpicked another story you'll love. Don't
miss it. Click to watch it now.